Hey, everybody, and welcome to your next. I'm your host, Jerome, and we are in Canada this go around, y'all. I got Mike Brcic with me today, and you know, very rarely do I just meet somebody and like I know right off the bat that they've got a message that everybody needs to hear. But I can tell you that you should buckle up because this one is going to be an amazing ride for you. I'm expecting some shifts to happen. I'm expecting you to get some real aha moments. And who knows, there may be an epiphany or two that allows you to move more quickly on your journey. And so, with that, Mike, welcome in, man. Thank you so much for taking time to hang out with me today.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. This is going to be good.
Yeah. So, I always open these up with, so you had an exit, right?
I did. Yeah, it's seven years ago now.
What led you to start that company? And then, yeah, let's just start there. What led you to start that?
Yeah, it's a good story. I I graduated university with a degree in history and economics, and I kind of took a look around at the world, took a look at myself, and it's like, what the hell am I going to do with this? I don't want to work on Bay Street, which is Toronto's equivalent of Wall Street. I don't know what I'm going to do with a history degree. And so I said, you know what? I'm just going to go be a ski bum for a year and I'll figure it out after that. But I need to get that out of my system. So I packed up my Volvo station wagon day after my last exam, drove out west, ended up in this little ski town in the Canadian Rockies. And then over the course of the next 6 months, I proceeded to get fired from my first three jobs. And after the third one, I took another look around and said, okay, clearly this working for others thing isn't working for me. And I'm in this little town of 6,000 people, and I'm pretty sure there's probably a poster of me up in the post office saying, "Do not hire this man." And so I was kind of in this despondent state, like, what do I do now? And I was walking on, there's this beautiful trail along the river, the Elk River in Fernie, British Columbia. And I was walking there with a couple of friends, and I said, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do now. I just got fired from my third job. And there's just something in me that doesn't like being told what to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. And my buddy says, well, clearly you got to start a business because I don't think anybody's going to hire you anymore. And so I let that simmer for a couple of days. And he said to me, you love mountain biking, and this town's got this amazing trail network. There's more and more tourists come in here every year. Why don't you just like see if anybody would pay you to guide them on the local trails? I said, that's an interesting idea. So let that simmer a couple of days. And then ended up talking another friend into it. We wrote a business plan. We took it to this organization called Community Futures, a couple of 24-year-olds, and said, "Hey, will you give us $10,000 to start this business?" And amazingly enough, they said yes. And so I proceeded to run that company for the next 23 years. My partner left in year four. He decided to become a chiropractor. Probably good judgment, given where we were at that point. But I just buckled down. I continued to grow it. We ended up being named the number one mountain bike tour operator on Earth by Outside Magazine, National Geographic Adventure Magazine. Got all these awards. By the time I left it, we were in 45 different countries uh, around the world, and that was kind of the start of the journey of just really kind of going against the grain and just following where my heart wanted to take me and not doing what the world expected of me. And thankfully, I've been a renegade and a rogue ever since.
It's funny, like I tell people all the time I'm unemployable at this point. It's something about the freedom, but like you're out there in the wild every day. What was it about mountain biking that just like made you want to do it every day? Because sometimes like that gets, it seems like it would get old, right? Like it seems like you'd be pulled to do something else. I just think like sitting on that seat all day has to be challenging all day, every day.
Yeah.
And probably in the end, you weren't out there doing it, but I don't want to like create a story that isn't true. So I'll just let it unfold.
Well, yeah, I mean that's definitely true. By the end, well, I'll get to the end eventually. But in those early years, the first 10 years, let's say, I was, and we were just running trips all over interior British Columbia. So our season was early June to mid late September. It was a pretty short season, but it was, we grew quite a bit during that time. It was just like stacked, like every week, new group of people coming in, more people coming in. I was the lead guide, I was the driver, I was the chef, I was the marketing department, I was the HR department. I was all these things, and eventually I built out a decent team to manage some of these roles. And I just loved living in the mountains. I loved being out in the wilderness. I love being in these like just spectacular areas. There was one trip we would do where we would go into this area of southeastern British Columbia. It's right near the Alberta and Montana borders, and it's this vast wilderness. It's home to the highest density of grizzly bears on Earth in this area, and it's just wilderness. And we would do this trip where we would bike for 5 days through this backcountry until we got to this provincial park called Akamina Kishinina. And the way that we went through this park, only about 20, 30 people a year go into the park from this side. So it was just like we would often run that trip, and it'd be an entire week. We wouldn't run into another soul. We'd run into more grizzly bears than people. And we wouldn't run into grizzly bears all the time. I mean, they're not just like jumping out from the bushes and stuff like that. And it was always safe. But it was just such an incredible, profound experience of like I'd be taking people from New York City to like this big, crazy wilderness, and you could just see you could watch in real time as their minds exploded. They're just like this profound, big wilderness, so much wildlife, and it was just you could watch their minds explode, their nervous system settle. You could see them kind of transform, and it was this beautiful journey, ending up at one of the most spectacular lakes in the world. And I just really got off on showing people just how beautiful this world is, how beautiful, the wildlife in this area was, the scenery, and just helping them, create that connection to the natural world was such a beautiful thing to do. And then eventually I started expanding all over the world. And one of the first trips we ever did outside of Canada was in Peru. And Peru is such a beautiful, sacred place. And and I'll tell you this, the company was initially called Fernie Fat Tire Adventures, and then it became Sacred Rides. And I'll tell you the story of that name change. I think it was day five of a trip. I think it was our second client trip in Peru, and we were still running under the old name. And that was Machu Picchu Day. So we sent all the clients off on the train to go, hike up to Machu Picchu for the day and come back. And I took the day off, and we'd just been riding hard for 5 days. I was looking forward to just chilling out in bed and relaxing. And my lead guide, who's also my friend, not bangs on the door at 7 a.m. And he's like, "Get your stuff on. We're going riding." I'm like, "Go away. I want to sleep. Go away." And he keeps banging. He's like, "No, no, you got to do this." So yeah, get my stuff on. And he proceeds to take me on the most incredible day of riding I've ever had in my life into these like remote villages in Peru, up this big mountain. Whatever. We end up at the top of this mountain at this like 600-year-old Inca ruin. And it's the most gorgeous place I've ever seen. We're the only ones there. And I'm like, "What is this?" And he says, "This is the former palace of the first Inca king." I'm like, "What the hell are we doing? Why are we the only people here? This is crazy. If this were in the United States or Canada, there'd be a million people here. There'd be a lineup of tour buses. We had the place to ourselves." And then that just followed with the most incredible descent. And literally for 6 hours, the hair was up on the back of my neck. It was just like, this is the most incredible experience I've ever had. And it was also an incredibly sacred experience. And that's where the name Sacred Rides came from. And it also happened to be sort of kind of adjacent to the Sacred Valley of Peru. And so that was the beginning of expanding all over the world and chasing these quote unquote sacred experiences that would shift people's perspective and shift people's minds. And it was a beautiful journey. And like you said, in the last 7 or 8 years of the company, I was so focused on expanding it and growing it and bringing on investors and all that kind of stuff you're supposed to do that I lost sight of the original thing, and I didn't have contact with my customers anymore. I was putting out fires all day, writing shareholder reports, and it kind of got pretty miserable along the way. And I decided to sell it and focus on what I'm doing now. But it was a beautiful ride, pun intended.
The point where the relationship changes with the business is something that I think is understudied and misunderstood by most. And typically, I think founders just believe that something's off but they're not sure what it is. And then in some instances, they start to resent the business, right? And they eventually, some decide they don't want to do it anymore. This is something that I've been picking up more and more, and I'm changing my thinking around it. What you just described, I think, is like the typical sense. As you expand, you get away from the people and the problem and you actually solving it. And now you're creating infrastructure for other people to solve the problem. And you're creating funnels for the people to get in so that you can solve the problem. And I think that disconnection from the end user is something that is a challenge for the people who are actually in it for the work. And so you decided to exit and you've moved on to greener pastures. On the backside of the exit, um, when the wire hit, did that feeling of achievement or success last for a long time?
I'm gonna give you the short answer to that, which is no. And then I want to rewind to something you said, and then I want to come back to your question. You were talking about, that sense of disconnect people get from the business and they feel burnt out or they feel overwhelmed. And in my experience, and also, I've worked with dozens, hundreds of entrepreneurs who with that same feeling. That's most of my customers who come to me and come to my experiences. There's a few things at play here. And in my journey, it was number one, a disconnect from the customer and the value that we were creating for them. So spending, my time managing the team, whatever, I had barely any connection with the customer. There was a disconnection from the why of what we were doing. I could sort of, I could sense that what we were doing was creating a lot of value for people and it was meaningful, but I wasn't connected to it all. And if I'd spent more time on the ground with customers, and seeing how they light up, seeing the effect on it, probably would have kept me motivated a little bit longer. But then, there's other businesses where it doesn't matter how much contact you have with the customer, you don't really feel a sense of meaning from the business. And that's a bigger question to answer. Do you want to spend your life doing work that has no meaning? And then another piece of it was I was doing a lot of work that just did not light me up. No, nobody loves writing shareholder reports. I had to do that, but there was all sorts of other stuff that I was holding on to that I really should have delegated. And what I loved doing, I loved scouting out new destinations and checking out new places, exploring, putting together the itinerary, stuff like that. Some of it was just the reality of I had three young kids and there was only, there was very little of that I could do, but that was something that really lit me up. And in hindsight, I should have just like delegated the shit out of everything else and just focused on that because that was where I created the real value. Because I would often I had lots of media connections, so I'd often bring media along on these trips, and I would get great publicity out of it while I'm just like lit up and having the time of my life, right? And so all of these different things like disconnect from customers, disconnect from meaning, disconnect from what lights you up, those all contribute to that sense of burnout. And it doesn't if you're feeling all three of those, it doesn't really matter where you start, like start somewhere. And if the meaning really isn't there, then ask yourself again, like, do I want to spend the rest of my life doing something that doesn't provide me with any sense of meaning? So I want to get back to answering your question there. That um, that glow of that, I got the signed purchase agreement, I got the wire transfer. I think it lasted, let's say 8 hours. This is something this is something I've been building towards for, 23 years. And what I really felt was just kind of exhausted. And it was just the culmination. It was a 2 year journey of trying to get to that point. And 2 years of like I knew I was done with this business. I knew I had to sell it. And as you know, it takes a long time. It can take a long time to sell a business. And by the time that agreement and that wire landed, it was a temporary sense of, I did it, whatever. And then it's like, now what? Right. And I was really fortunate to have an amazing group of advisors, group of other founders, and we met every month. And it happened to be, 5 weeks later, after that agreement was signed, I was free and clear of the business because it was super turnkey. And the agreement was that I would work for the acquirer. Just, we would have a meeting every Tuesday for 6 months. And after five weeks, it was basically, you know what? I'm good. We don't need to do this. Don't waste your time, whatever. So 5 weeks later, I'm free and clear of the business. And then ended up meeting with my advisory board. And I said to them, I'm free and clear of this business now. I've got these 5 or 6 side projects that I've been kind of, nipping away at over the last couple of years. Which of these should I turn into a business? And I was blessed to have an amazing group of advisors, and every single one of them said, "What the hell? You don't need to jump right into the next thing. You've been grinding away at this for 23 years. Just take some time and slow down, enjoy your family, get to know yourself, and then you can figure it out." And that was such beautiful advice. And I ended up taking 6 months, doing nothing and just really getting to know myself. And this might be the same for you. A lot of the people you've talked to, that's really uncomfortable. When you've built your whole identity from grinding away, that was my baby. It's all of a sudden my baby's off to college and this empty nest, and what do I do now? And it was really uncomfortable, but I forced myself to sit with that and just like really slow down, get to know myself. And that was a beautiful journey in and of itself.
You said it's uncomfortable, but I think for most people it's terrifying. Right? You're talking about the
Yeah.
nourish piece. And your business is a little bit different, but I would suspect that you didn't take much time off from the business. Like you talked about the one day that you wanted to take time off in Peru, and your guy's like, no, come on, we're going. Uh, how do you do nothing for 6 months? Like, I don't know anybody that does that well that's been charging for 20 plus years.
I mean, I don't want to overstate the nothingness of it. I had already started running some events with my current company, Wayfinders, and and it was just, it wasn't quite a business yet. I was just doing some events on the side, and I had an event coming up 6 months later. So I mean, realistically, it was like a few hours of work a week just to like prepare for that and fill it up and whatnot. But certainly wasn't a lot of work, and it was I had 3 young kids at the time to that they could use plenty of attention, so I gave them that. I had a partner who needed my attention, but I also just took time to just read, meditate, chill out, ride my bike, go skiing, whatever, just to like force myself to not do anything. And part of it was intentional, um, allowing myself to not have my identity tied to my role, to my specific business role, and just sit in that discomfort or that terror of, oh my God, who am I without this thing? Because that's pretty much every entrepreneur's story, and it's not healthy. It's not healthy when your whole identity is tied to that, because as we know, business can be gone overnight. There's some external shock or internal shock, or who knows, and all of a sudden you're busy, you can't make your next payroll. And I've sat with a lot of buddies who've been in that place, and either they're on the verge of losing their business or they lose their business, and it's like, who the hell am I now? I've been getting so much of my value and self-worth from this thing for so long. I don't know who I am anymore. And so it was a beautiful journey of getting to know who I am beyond those roles, and so
Wow.
worthwhile.
It's interesting though. You said you did nothing, but you already had your next. Right? You knew what you were going to be working on going forward, even if you weren't doing it at an intense pace. You had some stuff to still stimulate you from a, I'll call it a business perspective, and I don't want people
Yeah.
to
Well, and
miss
and
that.
yeah, and yet there was another part of me that wanted to launch something on top of that. And my advisory board was like, well, you got this thing, like you don't have to work at it very hard, but like you don't need more on top of that. And it was like it's that hunger, right? Like we always feel like we want more, and we're always doing more, and we're trying to achieve more. And I want to tell you, if we can work it in somewhere, I want to tell you about the monks of Bhutan, but I'm going to let you finish your question there.
It was just a statement of like Mike figured out what was next before he exited. Like he already had the thing, and it was a matter of like experimenting or exploring how you actually execute that. You had an event, you had this thing, and it was more of a dance versus a march. And like to me, I think that's magical because as you're taking the time to get to know yourself, knowing that there's something out there there is a North Star. You've identified people and a problem that you want to work on. It, it's settling, and it also allows you to have a filter to frame to make your decisions from. And I watch people who truly have nothing. Like they walk out and they go from 60 miles an hour to zero, and they have no idea what anything looks like. And I mean, it is just a catastrophe because there's nothing to
Yeah.
anchor the life that they've like walked out of and walked into.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure you've seen this, this thing that we celebrate and that we put up on a throne and a pedestal that we're, trying to encourage entrepreneurs to move towards, like build your business, have that big exit, 10 figures, whatever. Far more often than not, I see that actually creating people end up more miserable than when they were in the business. Because all of a sudden they've got, huge gobs of money. They don't know what the hell to do with it. They don't have this thing that they've put so much time and energy that has shaped their identity. And now they've got all these gobs of money. Probably their friends, aren't just sitting around like, hey, let's hang out all the time because you've got all this free time. And it's like this, it becomes an existential crisis. And, money can't solve that, right? And so what I see more often than not is like they just launch right into the next business. And there's this badge of serial entrepreneur. And it's like, okay, I'm going to build the next thing and then I'm going to exit that. It's like, well, how about you actually find out who you are at the core of your being and build something that like springs from that and devote the rest of your life to that thing because it just lights you up and it fills you up instead of like moving from exit to exit to exit. And it's like, I've seen people do that, six, seven, eight time exit. And it's like they don't look very fulfilled to me. They get a little bit of adrenaline rush from the building and the exiting, and they get ego validation and they get, people patting them on the back. But are they getting nourished on a soul level? Are they doing the work their soul wants to do in the world? Like, no. And so for me, I have zero plans of exiting Wayfinders. I want to build this thing. I want to create a beautiful legacy, maybe create something that my children and grandchildren can participate in that touches, thousands, maybe millions of people. But it certainly doesn't come from needing the validation from it. It comes from a deep desire to want to contribute to the future of humanity. And I can do that until my dying breath.
When you shift to the infinite game of fulfillment and you get out the finite game of more money, I think things change quite a bit. And I'm not sure if this connects directly to the monks or not, but I think we're going to find out something in that monk story about how you find more of yourself. So let's go down that path.
Before I take you to Bhutan, I also want to point out to people, I think a lot of people see this trade-off between meaning and fulfillment and financial wealth on the other. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think you can have both. You can have incredible abundance, you can have incredible meaning, you can create incredible value and profound impact on people's lives. And there's so many people out there who are looking, looking for something, looking to feel more connected, looking to feel more meaning and fulfillment in their lives. And if you can provide that for them, there's lots of people who will pay you handsomely for that. So I want to, I want to decouple the decoupling of those things and bring them back together because meaning, fulfillment, and abundance, direct financial abundance, can coexist and they can coexist beautifully. So people don't have to make that trade-off. So I want to take you to Bhutan. Um, the This ties directly, to the conversation around doing versus being. And most of us, entrepreneurs, most of us here in the West, we're really good at the doing game, right? We're chasing achievement, we're chasing goals, we're chasing BHAGs, those big, hairy, audacious goals, all that kind of stuff, right? And the world celebrates us. It reinforces that. There's all kinds of awards for people who are achieving all sorts of things. And so you internalize that. That's the route to a happy, fulfilled life. It's just achieve a lot of stuff. And then lo and behold, 2019, I go to Bhutan for the first time. Bhutan is this tiny little landlocked country sandwiched between China and India in the Himalayas, very Buddhist. You may have heard of the concept of gross national happiness. That was developed in Bhutan by the king. And it was in direct response to this notion that GDP is a terrible way to measure the wealth of a country. And so they measure their wealth in terms of the well-being of its citizens, the well-being of its natural environments, the well-being of their children, all these kind of things. So gross national happiness is inspired by Buddhism. There's eight actual, it's not a bumper sticker or a slogan. It's a very real thing, how they govern their country. And it's guided by these eight pillars. And it's beautiful. It's an absolutely beautiful thing. But that just says something about the country itself. And so across this country, this very Buddhist country, there's dozens, maybe hundreds of monasteries, and they're usually perched like high up the mountain for seclusion, all through these mountains. And so my very first trip there, I found myself in this monastery, Fajring Monastery. It's at about 12,000 feet high up this mountain. It takes about 4 or 5 hours to hike up there, and it's this beautiful monastery. And ended up spending quite a lot of time with the monks there. And I brought two groups there over the last few years. I'm bringing my third group there, and I was able to develop a relationship with them so that they opened up their monastery to. We were the first group that they ever brought in for an overnight visit. They would have, people come in and visit for the day and say hi, and they'd have a tea and then they'd leave. But we actually, when I went there the first time in 2019, we spent 3 days there and slept, in their quarters with the monks, ate with the monks, prayed with them, chanted with them. It was such a beautiful experience, and I got to know them really well. And when you're a monk in Bhutan, once you reach a certain age, I think it's 18, and you want to pursue this path and you want to become a lama or whatever the next stage up is, you have to go into seclusion. And you go into seclusion for 3 years. And so, they have these huts and these caves scattered around the monastery, and you go into seclusion. You don't have any contact with anybody else, other than somebody who brings your food outside your door, but you never see them or talk to them. And you spend 3 years just sitting and meditating and praying and just being. It is the ultimate act of being. They're not achieving, they're not quote unquote achieving anything. But I'll tell you, these are some of the most peaceful, most joyous, most radiant humans I've ever met on the planet. You just feel it through the center of their soul, and they're just smiling and they're radiant, and they're like that because they have developed a relationship with their inner life. They've quieted their mind. They've developed a relationship with God, a true relationship, and they don't feel the need to be on this hamster wheel of always doing and achieving more and more. And so, and now, like I said, I'm taking my third group there. I'm pretty sure nobody of the last 2 months, and probably nobody of this upcoming group, is going to go there and decide, I think I want to become a monk, and I'm going to, I highly doubt that's going to happen. But I know that everybody is profoundly touched by that experience, and it begins to unravel this story of my self-worth is tied to always doing things, and it's in direct proportion to how much I can achieve in this life. And they start to realize, oh, I can just slow down a little bit, and I can just be, and I'm totally okay, and I'm worthy just by the act of being a human being, and I can just spread kindness in the world, and that's all I need to do. And of course, we need to pay the mortgage and all that kind of stuff, but it eases the pressure a little bit, right? Because
So,
it's so easy to think like we're not doing enough, right?
what is our self-worth tied to if it's not achievement?
This is going to sound like a cryptic answer, but to me, it's tied to stillness. It's tied to my ability to just sit and be still and allow, all the thoughts and all the emotions and feelings to come up that will often tell me, I'm not good enough or I'm not, and just sit with that long enough until it passes. And then I just realize my self-worth exists beyond all of that. My self-worth exists simply because I'm a human being in this world. I am a creature of this world. I'm a creature of God or of the universe or whatever word that works for you. And that alone is enough. And when I feel that in the center of my being, it's just like dials down the pressure a little bit. And then I can just exist in relation to the people around me, like you or my kids or my friends. And I can simply be without needing to prove myself to others, without needing validation from them. I can simply be and be in beautiful relationship with others and with myself, with the natural world. And that's totally enough. And so, I'm maybe overstating how good I am at this because I still struggle with this. But I know that this is part of my journey is to get to that place where I just feel that, at the core of my being, and I can just let that be. And then the beautiful thing about that is I can choose where and how I focus my efforts without those efforts needing to be tied to prove myself to the world or to others or needing validation. And it's so easy in relationship, particularly in an intimate relationship, for instance. My history of intimate relationship with women was always, going from one relationship to the next, looking for that validation from women to tell me I'm okay, to tell me I'm good enough, to tell me I'm, enough of a man or whatever. And when you go into a relationship like that, boy, oh boy, that cup is never going to get filled. And it's not the partner's job to do that. It's your job to fill that cup yourself. And then you can be in a much more wholesome, beautiful relationship with that other person because you see them for what they are and they see you for what you are, and you don't need to be anything else beyond that.
Sure, somebody's out there asking, well, what do you fill the cup with? Right? It's not your partner's responsibility, but well, what do I fill the cup with, Mike? Stillness?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's part of it. Um, there's a beautiful poet by the name of Rumi. Maybe you've heard of him. And I think I might twist this quote, but it's something along the nice. It's something along the lines of our task is not um, to find love or to seek love. Our task is to find the barriers within ourselves to love and remove them. Right. And for me, that's been the journey. It takes all sorts of, there's all sorts of different practices, whether it's, working with a therapist or whether it's breath work or whether it's stillness or whether it's psychedelics or whether it's just, journaling or sitting with my thoughts or whatever. But all of those are practices that remove, peel the onion back. And for me, what's at the core is just pure love. And if I can just pull that away little bit by bit, I get closer and closer. I'll never get there, where it's just pure love. But that the more I peel that onion, the more I just feel that sense of I'm totally okay just the way I am, and I feel much freer to just express love in the world however I want to. And then other people feel it, and they want to be part of that journey as well. And they're like, tell me how you do that. And and then I give them my 12-step manual, which I don't have, but I just share a little bit about my journey and how I get there because the world, ever since we were a little kid, the world is just adding to that onion, creating more and more layers. Every comment, every time somebody tells us we're not good the way we are, or we're not good enough at this or whatever, that just adds more layers on there. And then as adults, our journey is to start peeling that back. And when you start peeling that back, it's such a beautiful journey because you get to know yourself more, you get to love yourself more, you get to express work in the world that reflects who you are rather than what somebody told you you should be. And you can look back at the end of your life and say, damn it, I lived my life. That was my life that I lived. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I fucked things up and whatever, but that was my life. And I lived it with grace and fierceness and love, and it was beautiful.
Wondering this since you brought it up, because you said you're the first ones to spend the night. How do you convince the monks that you can bring these people who aren't familiar with their ways in and it's going to be okay for them to basically live amongst them?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of touched at the heart of my model and the experiences that I create. And my goal when I create a new experience for Wayfinders is I want to create something that's so unique that nobody has ever done before, and that takes us in deep into the heart of something real and authentic about that place and about that culture. And I want to experience that culture on a deep and visceral level. And for so much of travel, this quote unquote culture is it's Instagram experiences, right? You take a cooking class, some people come out in grass skirts and they dance for you and you take pictures, and it's just completely performative. You don't learn anything about them really. They don't learn anything about you. So my goal is I want to create these immersive experiences where we can truly get to know each other, and it's a two-way exchange because a lot of these people have a deep curiosity about Westerners, but their typical experience of Westerners is that transactional kind of thing. And so when you create experiences where you can have that two-way flow and you can get to know each other on a heart level, it's really a beautiful thing. And so a lot of that work is, the work of going there beforehand, building relationships, building trust, spending time with people, and basically, getting to know their heart and helping them to get to know mine. Because often in the communities where I work, they're pretty distrustful of outsiders, right? And so I have to come in there and spend enough time so that they trust my intentions, that I'm not going to come there and just exploit them or treat them like museum pieces or whatnot. And so, and also just working with great local people who already have the connections. So I'm not going there and like driving the bus myself like I did back in the day. I'm working with local people. So my goal is to find really trusted local partners. But the biggest part of that is, are we on the same wavelength? Do we see the world the same? Do we see tourism the same? Do we see, cultural interaction the same? And so it's just that act of relationship building, really.
This go around, how do you make sure that you don't get too far away from the customer, right? Like, how do we make sure that you don't resent the business again or feel disconnected like you did with the mountain biking company?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question and it's so timely. That has not been an issue to date because for 9 years I've designed and hosted and facilitated every single event and every single experience. And I only do three a year. And the groups are anywhere from 16 to 24 people. It's a high ticket item. Um, and and because of the price that I charge, it forces me to think, how can I create tremendous value for people that they're going to get three times this large sum of money that they're giving me, three times or 10 times value out of that. And so if I'm only doing three events a year, I can put my heart and soul into this. I can create really magical experiences. And now I'm at the point where, I intentionally kept things small. I kept things chill. I didn't want to repeat the mistakes. And now I'm at the point, my kids are a little bit older. I have more ability to travel, whatever. I have more ability to scale the business. And I'm asking myself, how do I scale it without repeating the mistakes of the past? And the technical part of that question, um, I can answer fairly easily. I know what it means, or I know how to create structure, infrastructure, playbooks, hire a team, delegate, all that kind of stuff, so that I'm primarily working in my zone of genius. The bigger, more philosophical question, or spiritual or emotional one, is how do I build this in a way that I'm building it so that I can serve more people and not serving my ego? Because that's where that hunger for scale really came from with my last business. I wanted the business, I wanted the world to validate me. I wanted to be on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine, all that kind of stuff. And now it's like, how do I keep that ego in check? Because it's always there, it doesn't go away. But how do I pay attention and say, hey, I see you. This is not why we're doing things around here. So just chill and build things the right way. So the big piece of that for me is because people have developed so much trust in me. Because when they go on an event, I'm there, I'm hosting the event, I'm facilitating, I'm taking them on a emotional journey, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of trust in me. So how do I replicate that without me being at the heart of it? And so the answer to that, I've spent the last 6 months like really documenting all of that, everything about how I do an event, the frameworks we use for facilitation, the journey we take people on. That's all getting documented. And the next step is finding the people that I can train to do this, and then creating a roadmap for how we get people there. So it's basically, you can come on as an assistant, and then you can work your way up to co-facilitator until you're ready, and then you can take on an event. I don't know how long that's going to take. It's kind of a special, unique thing that I do, but I think in the next year and a half, I think I can have my first qualified facilitators to run an event without me. And that, the idea of like being able to send a group off with somebody else is both terrifying and exciting because there's so much trust involved in that. It's not a travel experience. It's a deep soul journey that happens to take place in another part of the world, right? And so I need the right people for that.
Yeah, change the location so that they can get out of the muck and mire of routine and actually be open to a new experience because they're in a new place. This is fascinating. And I'm gonna ask you a question. I'm not sure it's fair to ask you because I didn't warn you I was going to ask you, but I think you'll have an answer. And so the question is, what does fulfillment mean for you? Because you've disconnected from like more money. And I say that in a hyperbolic way because I think some people, um, that's all that they're optimizing for is how can I accumulate more? Uh, you're, I might be answering the question, but it seems like you're working to spread more love. But what does fulfillment actually look like for you? Because I believe that's what you're optimizing for now.
Yeah. And I'm also, to be clear, I'm not decoupling that from financial abundance because I know that my financial abundance moves in lockstep with the amount of value I create in the world and for the world. So the more I'm focused on creating deep value for others, I know that the abundance will move in lockstep with that. But the fulfillment part for me is really, it's almost synonymous with alignment. And again, alignment is just, does my outer world closely match and express my inner world, who I am at my core? And so if the answer to that is yes, if the work that I'm doing in the world feels like an expression of my soul, of my heart, of my skills and my passions, then that is deeply fulfilling to me. And when I operate from that place, I find more often than not, success seems to follow and abundance seems to follow. And when I'm acting out of alignment, when I'm trying to be something I'm not, or I'm trying to achieve something that I don't actually really at a soul level want to achieve, that's when the friction comes into the system. And the more I can bring things in alignment, the more things are in flow. And the more the universe seems to align around that and bring me the right opportunities, and that's deeply fulfilling, right? I'm doing the work I'm meant to do in this life, in this body, in this soul, and at this time. And that's ultimately it. That's ultimately it. I just want to, I want my life to be an expression of who I am.
When did you realize you knew who you were? Because in order to do that, you got to know who you are.
I'll be honest, I'd say that's a work in progress. And I really don't think I'll ever get there because, obviously on a fundamental level, I'm always evolving. And who I am, you know, definitely very different than who I was 10 years ago. I'm also profoundly different than who I was 4 months ago. Because the last 4 months, I've gone through pretty significant set of business and other challenges that kind of, for a little while, rocked me to my core. And then when I was able to, calm down, slow down enough, I was able to shift from what the heck is happening? Because, business had been like super smooth and easy and flowy for 8 years, 8+ years at that point. And then all of a sudden, all this stuff happening at once. And my initial reaction was like, what the heck? What is going on here? And it was quite overwhelming. And then I was able to slow that down and say, hey, what's happening here? I'm being called to some sort of evolution. The business is being called to an evolution. I'm being called to grow and learn here. My job here is to be curious and ask, what is being asked of me? How do I need to grow in this situation? And it's been a difficult but also a really profound journey. And I've learned so much about myself in that process. And I've shed old beliefs and old patterns that don't really serve me anymore, that didn't serve the company. I've gotten incredible insight and clarity about the next evolution of my work that I want to take things into. And so, as recently as 4 months ago, it felt like almost a very different person back then. So I'm constantly evolving, constantly getting to know myself, but I'm constantly guided by that question of who am I? Right. And I don't spend like every waking minute asking myself, who am I? Who am I? But it is a regular part of my conversation with myself. Whether that's, one of the best ways I have conversation with myself is I'll just go into the woods for a couple of days on my own, no phone, no journal, no nothing, just like hanging out in the woods, walking, sitting at the base of a tree or whatever, and just creating that space for stillness answers a few questions, or if anything, or if not, then it brings up better questions about myself and who I am and where I want to go. So I can't give you a percentage of what percentage I know myself at this point, but I'm moving more and more in that direction. And I'll give you a percentage just for shits and giggles. I feel like I 80% know myself, and there's another 20% of just like beautiful mystery locked up in there that's just like waiting for me to discover it. And it's like, oh, when you find out this thing about yourself, man, it's going to be beautiful. And but I don't think there's 100%.
Yeah, it's elusive
There's got
for
to be
sure.
it's got to be a bit of mystery at the core.
Mike, if they want to find out more about Wayfinders and these three retreats you do a year, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, way-finders.com, and you can read a little bit more about, next year we're Bhutan is in the fall is sold out, but next year going to this beautiful part of northern Colombia called the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta. It's highest coastal mountain range on earth, beautiful jungle, rivers, ocean, and we're going to be spending time with the Kogi people, who are some of the most incredible indigenous groups on the planet. Morocco in June, going with my friend and incredible co-facilitator Philip McKernan, and then going back to Patagonia in December. And I think probably I might squeeze another one or two in there somewhere because things are shaping up nicely. So way-finders.com.
All right, guys. This one I told you was going to be amazing, and I think we absolutely delivered on it. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for the conversation.
To our listeners, your dreams should be real. We'll catch you on the next episode.